want you to engage with questions, and we'll have lots of time to do that as well. I guess most of us have heard a story that ends something like that, goes something like this. Blah blah blah. Something happens. Blah 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 blah, and they all lived happily ever after. And it's kind of a classic ending. Here's Cinderella and Prince Charming, and they all lived happily ever after. And you sometimes find yourself thinking, I wonder if they really did. Did they really live happily ever after? Did they not have any struggles in their marriage, any financial problems? Was it really happy forever? And of course, the answer is yeah, of course they lived happily ever after, because it's a fairy story, and that's how fairy stories work. But it's not the real world. You see, that isn't how the real world works. The best, I think, that we can hope for in the real world is happily for a little while. Happily ever after is fairy stories. Perhaps happily for a little while is the best that we can hope for. And so what we're going to think about this afternoon is, what if there's something more than that? What I'm going to try and do in this talk, and it's pretty ambitious, so you're going to have to stick with it and then ask questions. I'm going to try and show you that God has a plan for this world. A plan that is bigger and better even than happily ever after. Now, I realise that even in saying that, I've made some massive assumptions, and I want to ask you in this talk to go with those assumptions for a second. So, for example, I'm assuming there is a God. You may have big questions about that. I understand that, absolutely. It may be one of the reasons you're here. But let's just work on the assumption that there is a God, and let me show you what the Bible says is God's great plan for the world. And at this point, I'm not asking you whether you believe it's true or not. We'll come to that. All I want to do first is to ask you, can you see how good it is? Let me show you what God says his plan is. And I want to ask you, does it sound good to you? Because I think it's better than you could ever dream. And let me just talk to some of us on this call would already call ourselves Christians. Well, I want to challenge you guys, because I think this is better than you've ever dreamed as well. You see, sometimes we think, if you've ever had contact with Christian-y, God-y type people, I don't quite know who they are, but God-y sorts, people who talk about God, they tend to talk a lot about heaven, and this idea that when we die, we somehow go to heaven. Well, I'm going to try and show you God's plan is better than heaven. In fact, can I be so bold as to say, I don't want to go to heaven when I die. That's not the future hope that God has for us. It's better than that. You see, when we talk about heaven, what we tend to imagine is some floaty, disembodied candy floss world. Like what candy floss is like, right? You bite into it, it looks, but there's nothing really there. There's no real substance. I mean, a world made of candy floss would be horrific, right? I mean, it would taste great for a moment, but it'd be very sticky. Well, God's plan is not a candy floss, disembodied heaven. Let me show you what God says he has in store. Like I say, I'm not asking you to accept this is true at the moment. I just want you to see what God says. I'm going to share my screen so you can see some words that come from the Bible. Let's just have a look at these words together. These are from the very last book of the Bible. In fact, the last couple of chapters of the Bible. Let me read them for you. This is what God says is in store. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There'll be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. So here is what God says about his plan for the future. And I don't know if you noticed that the language of old and new. God says his plan is a new heaven and a new earth. The plan is that heaven will come down to earth, that God will come and dwell on earth. Heaven and earth reunited, new. That means the future that God has in store is a physical world, a real world, a bodily world. If I can quote Aladdin for a moment, what God has in store for us is a whole new world. I won't sing, much as I'm tempted to, because I do love to sing. But we're promised a whole new world, a new fantastic point of view. And one of the reasons that song, A Whole New World, oh, I sang. One of the reasons that song is so gripping, certainly to me, that one of the reasons I love it so much is because it speaks of something that we long for. We long for a whole new world. We long for a world that is better. We long for something new. In fact, one of the interesting things about human beings is that we crave new stuff. We just love things that are new. I remember recently I got a new bike. I went to Halfords and bought a new bike. It was all very exciting. And I got my new bike and I wheeled it out of Halfords and I was so excited because it was shiny and the tyres were all clean and they still had the little black bits of rubber around the outside and it smelled new, and I don't know why I was smelling it, but it smelled new, and it was so exciting. And I got on my bike and I rode it around Halfords car park, because that's what you do when you get a new bike, you go and test it out. And I rode it around the car park, and as I got back to the front door of Halfords, I looked at my bike, and do you know what I thought? It's not new anymore. It's weird, isn't it? Newness, it just doesn't last. It's sort of, we long for it, we crave it, and we want it, but it goes so quickly. Yeah, we long for what is new. It's gone in a moment. Or think of the new phone. Right, you get your new phone and you're so excited about this new phone, and it comes in its box and you unpack it and it's shiny and it's beautiful, and of course you take out a 2-year contract because it's a new phone and you'll always love this phone. You say to your new phone, I love you. You're going to be with me forever. You're awesome. You're wonderful. Of course I'll be with you for 2 years. And you're excited about your new phone, and then you switch on the telly and you discover that iPhone have brought out a new iPhone. iPhone, I mean, I don't even know what we're on anymore. I'm on an iPhone 5. That's where I am, stuck in the dark ages. But you see, now there's something new, and this phone that you so loved because it was new, now it just isn't that exciting anymore. And in fact, by the end of the 2-year contract, you hate your phone. I'm so fed up with you. I want to get to the end of my contract so I can upgrade. Because we constantly want stuff that's new. Did you see? God's plan for the world is to make it new. The craving that you have for newness, that longing, that love we have for newness, will find its satisfaction in this new world that God is creating. It is a newness that will satisfy us completely. And the amazing thing about this new world that God is promising is that it is a world that will stay new, that will not become old, newness that lasts. Now, look, at this point, you've got to keep remembering this. I'm not asking you whether you believe this is true or not. I'm trying to show you what God says is his plan for the future. a new world, and a new world where all that is old has gone. The old order of things has passed away. That is all the stuff that is associated, all the stuff that's wrong with this world. Death, suffering, no more tears, no more pain, no more crying, no more cancer, no more funerals, no more hospitals, no more viruses. The old order passed away. God made everything new. That's God's plan for the world. That's his great promise. Does it sound good? A physical, real, new world where we can live and enjoy. But at this point, of course, you say, yeah, okay, whatever. That sounds like a fairy story. That's happily ever after. And happily ever after doesn't exist. John T., it's very nice of you to tell us all this stuff, but you need to wake up. You obviously can't cope with the harsh realities of this world. You need to get over it, get on with life. And I'd agree with you. I'd agree that it sounds too good to be true. I'd agree that it sounds ridiculous. Except for one thing. One reason that I think that's true. And the reason is, I think it's already started. I think it's already happened. We can look back in history at an event that has already happened that shows us that God really will do this new thing. So let's we're going to come back to the whole new world in just a few minutes. Let's just fill in some other stuff along the way and try and follow this through, and hopefully you'll see what I'm getting at. The current world that we live in, if you like, the old in this old new thing, the current world we live in is a world of decay, right? Everything that we in our world now is decaying. So that piece of fruit that you bought because you were intending to eat it and be healthy, that bit of fruit that never quite got round to being eaten, it decays, right? It rots. It goes off. If you like, everything in our world is heading in one direction. Now, again, I'm not gonna sing. Don't panic. But everything in our world, a bit like One Direction's music, is like death. If you like One Direction, I apologize. They're great. Love them really. Everything goes from life to death. It's one direction. Everything travels that way. Everything's decaying. Look, even as you watch me on the screen, okay, I am decaying right now. In front of your very eyes. I don't want to be morbid and stuff, but the reality is that I'm dying. I'm doing it quite slowly. But by the end of this talk, I will be closer to death than I was at the start. And so will you. Because we're decaying. And you know what? That sucks. It sucks to live in a world where everything decays. It's painful. And that's what makes us cry. That's what makes us suffer. And of course, our world has no answer to that. Really, the only answer that our world has is we'll just forget the future and live in a moment. Mindfulness is about just enjoying now. I read an article the other day about how to eat a raisin slowly. I don't know why I read an article about how to eat a raisin slowly, but the point was we need to learn to enjoy everything now, the moment now. Forget the future. Don't worry about the future. Just enjoy the moment. I don't even like raisins. But anyway. But the problem is it's difficult really to do that. Because as you go through life, questions of the future and questions of death just keep pushing their way in. When I was a child, I laughed and wept, and time crept. When as a youth I grew more bold, time strolled. When I became a full-grown man, time ran. When older still I daily grew, time flew. Soon I shall find, when passing on, time gone. That's the reality of our world. We are heading in one direction, from life to death, from birth to the grave. At which point you may well say to me, well, that's it. Just get over it. Stop telling me that. I know that. I don't want to think about that. Stop looking for fairy stories and just get on with it. But what if? What if we were made for more than that? What if we were made for a bigger story? What if we're not supposed to live in a world of death, but rather a world of life? You see, when God first made the world, according to the Bible, everything moved in the other direction. Everything moved from death to life. That was the direction. If you like, you know the Nike. Of course, you know Nike, right? Nike, yes. The Nike swoosh, right? It goes whoosh, that shape. That's the shape from down to up, from death to life. That's the shape of the way that we think, we sort of feel the world should work. There's a reason that Nike didn't go for the shape. There's a reason that they didn't go for a droop, but they went for a swoosh. Because the swoosh sums up the kind of shape that we long for. We love swoosh stories. We love happily ever after. We love stories that go from death to life. Why? Could it be that we're hardwired for that story? Could it be there's something about us which is designed for life rather than death? Could it be that's why we rebel against extinction? Because we were made for life, not death. But we don't live in that world. We live in the world of death to life. We live in the world of life to death. How did it come to be that way? Well, because as human beings, we've turned away from the God who made us. We've turned away from the God of life. And we find ourselves in the place of death. So the world that should be death to life has become the world of life to death. And we now move in that direction. Everything is decaying. But God still has a plan, a remarkable, breathtaking, beautiful plan. And his plan is to reverse the direction. This is how God did it. God, the creator God, entered our world of decay. Right? God doesn't have a body, he's God. And so God is not decaying, and yet God entered our world. He became a human being. This is what Christians call the incarnation. Bit of a poncy word, but not difficult to remember. You know, chili con carne. You ever had chili con carne, right? Chili con carne. Do you know what literally that means? Chili with con carne. Chili con carne. Chili with meat. Carne is meat. So it's chili with meat. That's what it literally means. I went to a restaurant the other day. They offered me vegetarian chili con carne. I'm like, no, that you can't have that because con carne means with meat. Anyway, so incarnation literally means God con carne. God with meat. God become flesh. So the incarnation, God became human. God took on human flesh. Do you know, there's no other world religion, there's no other philosophy in the world that has that at the heart of its claim. That God would become one of us, that God would become a man. And why on earth would he do that? Well, God became a man because it was the only way he could save us. You see, he entered our story. He walked our road. He experienced our suffering. And so Jesus, God become man, knew what it was to be hungry. He knew what it was to be tired. He knew what it was to be thirsty. He experienced the old order. He experienced the world of death, even to the point where he goes to die on a cross. Jesus experienced life to death. In fact, this is, let me share my screen and show you some words. This is from the end of Mark's Gospel. And let's just see that, where we're told it was preparation day. This is the same day that Jesus was crucified. Jesus has died on a cross. It was preparation day. That is the day before the Sabbath. So as evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea, prominent member of the council, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. Summoning the centurion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. When he learned from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. So Joseph bought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in the linen, and placed it in a tomb cut out of the rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Right, what's left of Jesus? At the end of his life, after Jesus has died on the cross, all that's left is a body. You see that? A body. And that body is taken down from the cross, and it's just a corpse. Human body like we have, flesh. And that body is taken down from the cross and is placed in a tomb, and a great big stone is rolled in front of the tomb. Jesus has gone from life to death. He's dead. And we might say, well, all right, fine, whatever, he's dead. Bully for him. He's dead, just like all the other people are dead, just like so many people are dead, just like everybody dies. Yet, except what happened 3 days later. See, something remarkable happened. Here's what we're told in Mark's Gospel about what happened 3 days later. And you've got to see this. This is what changes everything. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early, on the first day of the week, just after sunrise. Look, even that, right? Even there, can you not sense there's something going on? It's early in the morning, just after sunrise. The crackling anticipation of something new, something big has happened, something has changed. We're about to be told something that is going to change all of human history for the rest of all of time. Something monumental has happened. They're on their way to the tomb, and they ask each other who will roll a stone away from the entrance of the tomb. You see, they're going to the tomb to find the body of Jesus. They're going to the tomb to anoint his body. They assume he's still dead because everybody knows that dead people stay dead. Everybody knows that no one comes back to life. Everybody knows that everything moves in one direction. This is basic science. But when they get there, when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. Here's the first indication that perhaps something extraordinary has happened. This stone has been rolled back. Is it possible that there is someone who is able to turn back the stone of death, roll back death itself? As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You're looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not. And here, just stop there. And here it is, right? This is the moment when suddenly we discover that this Jesus, God con carne, God become man, who went to death itself, is alive again. And this claim is central to what Christians believe, that Jesus rose from the dead. On that morning, if this is true, then Jesus, for the first time in history, someone went from death to life. Someone reversed the direction. That morning, death lost its 100% record. And if that genuinely happened, the implications of that are monumental for our world. Because it means that it is possible for death to be reversed to life. Now, that moment is a historical fact, a claim of history that you can explore for yourself. This is not an airy-fairy, one day you'll die and go to heaven. This is in actual human history, a real man called Jesus was dead and then he was alive again. You can explore that. You can discover that. You can explore and discover whether that is true for yourself. Look at the evidence. You've got to explore it. I've done that, and I am utterly, utterly convinced that Jesus rose from the dead. And if he rose from the dead, it changes everything. Because it means that death to life is now a possibility. Oh, there's so much more to say. Oh man, I've got loads more to say, and we've run out of time because I want to give you time for questions. But here's the deal. How do I know that one day God's great plan for this whole new world, how do I know that one day God's great plan to put everything right, for all death and sorrow and suffering to be finished with, and for all to be made new, how do I know that that is going to happen? Well, because Jesus was raised from the dead. And when Jesus rose, he showed us that death to life is now possible. Yeah, we still live in a world that is decaying. We still live in a world of life to death. But for all who will come to Jesus, he will give you life. That's the claim, the promise, the hope. And Jesus says, just as he rose from the dead, we too will rise to be part of this new world that God has promised. Now, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, we can forget the whole thing and go home. But if he rose from the dead, you'd be mad to ignore him. In fact, if Jesus rose from the dead and you choose to ignore him, then you will experience only death. Death forever without him. And this is the offer, this is the invitation, this is the beautiful plan that God has for this world, that he calls us and invites us to come be part of. Guys, I've said so much. I've talked far too much, and I'm going to stop. I want to give you a chance for some questions. Like I say, I'm not asking you to believe all of it right now. I'm not trying to say that you need to accept all of it straight away, but I'm trying to set out for you just how beautiful this plan is, so that you might really want to explore it for yourself.